Waters by Madeleine L'Engle, Chapter 9, Mahlah's Time, Lamech's Time. The afternoon was the hottest the twins had experienced. Sandy woke from unpleasant dreams of erupting volcanoes to see Denny's sitting up in his sleeping skins, shiny with sweat. Higayon spent the midday sleeping hours with Lamech. At night he dutifully took turns with the twins, but Sandy suspected that the past few nights had been spent at Grandfather Lamech's feet. The old man's extremities tended to get cold from lack of circulation. "Is anything wrong?" Sandy asked. "It's terribly hot." Thunder rumbled in the distance. "That might mean rain," Sandy said. For the moment he had forgotten that rain might mean flood. So had Denny's. "Oh, good for the orchards and the garden, even with all our watering." The thunder came again with a crackling electrical sound. Higayon padded over to them, whimpering, looking across the tent to Grandfather Lamech. The two boys hurried to the old man. The flap had been pegged open to let in as much breeze as possible, and the air outside was sulphurous, the sky a greenish yellow. Sandy squatted at one side of Grandfather Lamech, Denny's at the other. The old man was propped high on folded skins. Denny's took one of his hands and was shocked at how cold it was. He began to massage it, trying to get some circulation into the withered fingers. Lamech opened his eyes and smiled, first at one twin then the other. When he spoke, his voice was so faint that they had to strain to hear. "In your time and place, over the mountain, is it better?" Sandy and Denny's looked at each other. Sandy said, "It's very different." "How?" the voice whispered. "Well, people are taller and we don't live as long." "How long?" Denny's answered in words which seemed to him an echo of something long lost. 70 years and 10, sometimes 80, Denny's amended. Denny's looked at Sandy, at his tan, healthy skin, muscled arms and legs, clear eyes. "We have big hospitals, places to take care of sick people, but I'm not sure I'd have had any better care for my sunstroke there than I got from Yaleth and Oholibama." Sandy said, "We have showers and washing machines and radios and rockets and television and jet planes." Denny smiled. "But I came to your tent on a white camel, almost all the way." Lamech whispered, and both boys bent to hear. "People's hearts, are they kinder?" Sandy thought of the first vendor who tried to give him half the amount of lentils Grandfather Lamech had requested, and who had snarled and cursed when Sandy protested. Denny's wondered how much real difference there was between the terrorists who hijacked a plane and Tiglah's father and brother who had thrown them into the garbage pit. "People are people," Sandy started. Simultaneously, Denny said, "I guess human nature is human nature." Lamech reached out a trembling hand to each boy. "But you have been to me as my own." Denny's gently squeezed the cold hand. Sandy mumbled, "We love you, Grandfather Lamech, and I you, my sons." "El's words are strange words I don't understand," Lamech said. "I don't understand the thoughts of El." Neither did the twins. Lightning and thunder came simultaneously. Light splashed through the roof hole of the open tent flaps. The walls of the big tent shook from the violence of the thunder, and a long earth tremor, but no rain fell. The twins sat on the root bench to watch the stars come out. Higayon stayed in the tent with Grandfather Lamech. The sky still had a yellow tinge, though there was no further lightning or thunder. Tongues of flame licked up from the volcano. High in the trees, the baboons chittered nervously. Sandy curled his toes on the soft moss under the tree root. "We've never been to a deathbed." "No. I thought that was going to be one this afternoon with Grandfather Lamech." Denny shook his head. "I think he wanted to ask us those questions." "Does he know there's going to be a great flood?" "I think his El that he talks to has told him." Sandy picked up a fallen frond of palm and looked at it in the last light. "But the flood was a natural phenomenon." Denny shook his head slightly. "Primitive peoples have always tended to believe that what we call natural disasters are sent to them by an angry god, or gods." "What do you think?" Sandy asked. Again, Denny shook his head. I don't know. I know a lot less than I did before we came to the oasis. Anyhow, Sandy's voice was flat. It didn't work. What didn't work? The flood. Wiping out all those people and then starting all over again. People are taller, and when we do even worse things to one another, because we know more. Denny took the palm frond out of Sandy's hand. I wouldn't choose Ham and Anna to repopulate the world if I were doing the choosing. Oh, they're not that bad, Sandy said. And Shem and Elishab are all right. Not terribly exciting, but solid. And Japheth and Oholibama are terrific. Well, what you said, it didn't work. Maybe nobody should have been saved. Sandy's voice was hoarse. Yet again, Denny shook his head. Human beings, people, have done terrible things. But we're not all that bad. Not all of us. Like who? There have been people like, Euclid and Pasteur and Tycho Brahe. Sandy nodded. His voice came out more normally. I like the way Tycho Brahe was so in awe of the Maker of Heaven that he put on his court robes before going to his telescope. Who told you that? Meg. I like that, I really do. Hey, I think Meg would like us to mention Maria Mitchell. Wasn't she the first famous woman astronomer? I miss Meg and Charles Wallace and our parents. But Denny's was still involved in his list. And the wise men who followed the star, they were astronomers. Hey, what? If the flood had drowned everybody, if the earth hadn't been repopulated, then Jesus would never have been born. Sandy, his nostrils assailed by a now familiar and still disturbing odor, hardly breathed. Shh. What? Look. A small, shadowy form left the public path and came toward them. Tiglah. She doesn't give up, Denny's mumbled. Tiglah had learned that Denny's was not to be touched, not by her fingers at any rate. She approached the twins demurely, eyes cast down, giving her eyelashes the full benefit of their lustrous length. She reached out and put her hand lightly against Sandy, as though to steady herself. It's a fine evening, after all, she said. Denny's pulled back from the mingled odor of sweat and perfume. It's okay, Sandy looked dubiously at the yellow light pulsing on the horizon. Tiglah said, I thought you might like to know that Mahlah is going to have her baby tonight. How do you know? Denny's demanded. Rofokale told me. How does he know? Sandy asked. He and Uglio are friends. Yalith and Oholibama are going to help. The twins had seen kittens and puppies being born and once a calf, and they had played with baby lambs and piglets on a neighboring farm. They looked at each other. I bet Oholibama's a good midwife, Denny said. Tiglah continued. They tell me that Oholibama's mother had a hard time birthing her. Nephil babies tend to be large. She sounded anxious. Denny's looked at her sharply. Does that worry you? It might. One day. I hope it won't be so hard on Mahlah. She's such a little thing, like me. Well, Denny said, thanks for telling us. His tone was dismissive. It's going to be a beautiful night. Tiglah's fingers strayed toward Sandy's arm. Denny's turned his face away and looked toward the tent. The flap was still pegged open. Higayon was sitting in the opening, waving his trunk slightly as though to catch the breeze. Sandy looked at Tiglah, hesitated. Swiftly, Tiglah coaxed. It's such a nice night for a walk. After Mahlah's baby is born, Yalith and Oholibama will be walking home. We might meet them. Sandy rose to the bait. Well, but not far, or for long. Of course not, Tiglah reassured. Just a little walk. Sandy became aware of Denny's, carefully not looking at him. Are you coming? No. Do you mind if I go? Of course not. I won't be long. Feel free. They were not communicating. Sandy did not like the feeling, but he stood. Tiglah reached up and put her small hand into his much larger one. When they reached the public path, he looked back. Higayon had left the tent and was standing by Denny's. The night was heavier than usual. The stars looked blurred and almost close enough to touch. The rainless storm had increased rather than decreased the heat. The mountain smoked. Let's go to the desert, Tiglah suggested, and watch the moon rise. To step off the oasis into the desert was like stepping off a ship into the sea. The desert sand felt cool on Sandy's feet, which were now accustomed to the hot sands by day, to walking on stones, on sharp, dry grasses. Tiglah led the way to a ledge of rock. Let's sit. Moonrise over this early desert was very different from moonrise at home. At home, the moon lifted above the horizon. At home, as the moon lifted above the horizon, it was a deep yellow, sometimes almost red. Here, in a time when the sea of air above the planet was still clear and clean, the moon rose with a great blaze of diamonds. Sandy's eyes were focused on the brilliant light of the rising moon, and he was not prepared to have the light suddenly darkened by Tiglah's face as she pressed her lips against his. She was up on her knees in order to reach him, and her lips smelled of berries. Then he was surrounded by her particular odor of scented oils and her own unwashed body. He knew what she wanted, and he wanted it too. He was ready, but not, despite her gorgeousness, with Tiglah. Tiglah was not worth losing his ability to touch a unicorn, but Yalith. He knew that he and Denny should do nothing to change the story or alter history, even with Yalith. He was getting ahead of himself. Yalith was not Tiglah. Yalith smiled on both of them with equal loveliness. Tiglah's red hair, turned silver gold in the moonlight, tumbled about his face, drowning him in its scent. She massaged the back of his head, his neck. Her breathing mingled with his. He knew that if he did not break this off, he would not be able to. With a deep inward sigh, he pulled away, stood. Tiglah scrambled to her feet, stared at him reproachfully. "Don't you like it? Don't you like what I'm doing?" "Yes, I like it." His voice was hoarse. "I like it too much." "Too much? How can anything be too much? What is there in life except pleasure? And the more the better. How can you talk of too much?" "You're too much." He tried to laugh. "I think I'd better go now. Grandfather Lamech isn't well." "He's dying," Tiglah said bluntly. "Rofocale told me." "Rofocale doesn't know everything." "He knows more than we do. More than any mortal." Sandy stood still. He thought he heard the shrill whine of a mosquito, then silence. He turned and started walking back to the oasis. Tiglah slid down from the rock, ran to catch up with him, and reached for his hand. "You too," she said. "You must be of the same breed as Rofocale, so tall, so strong. You could pick me up and throw me over your shoulder. Where do you come from?" He was tired of answering the old questions. "Another part of the planet, another time." "Why have you come?" "It was a mistake," he said shortly. "But why was it a mistake to come? It's wonderful that you're here. How long are you going to stay?" "I don't know." "But you do have plans. What are you going to do?" "Take care of Grandfather Lamech's garden and groves. Is that all? You didn't come all this way just for that. You must have come for some reason." "No," he said. He removed his arm from her hand. And that is where we will pause.